Hello Devoxx. I'm happy to see you here. Today I'm here to talk about migrating an application from Angular 10 to Angular 18. But before I start and dive into all this, I would like to tell you a little story. Almost 11 years ago, I went for the first time at Devoxx here. And during this week, I attended a talk where the speaker was talking about front-end. Just to put some context, 11 years ago when we talked front-end, AngularJS has had a couple years. React.js was just new. So we are in a very different world than today. But at the time, the speaker explained that you can create a new app, add features, fix bugs, and add more features. But one thing you will probably never do is upgrade your framework for the front end. And I want to show you that it's not the case anymore. You can totally migrate your Angular application, even if there is 8 versions between the current one and the one you are in. My name is Loïc Magnette. I'm a senior developer for a consultancy company called Onirix. I'm also the proud dad of a little 3-year-old girl, and I'm one of the co-organizers of the Belgian Java user group. So if you want more events about Java, join us. And let's start a journey. This journey, if you're familiar with Angular, will probably start somewhere like update.angular.io. And you will put in your current version, and you will probably try to go 3 versions, but Angular will stop you and say, one at a time, please. And there is a good reason for that, because if you try to jump version, one warning can become a full disaster. And to give you an example, I did that. At some point, I went from one version to the next, and I got a warning, and I was like, that's bothering, but I don't see a quick fix. So let's try to migrate to the next version. And the warning became an error that I couldn't fix. So please go step by step, one version at a time. That's the best way to do it. And if you read what's Angular recommending, the first step is to select the right version of Node. And you could install it by hand every time switching version, but that's really not efficient. You can do that just by using tools like ASDF or NVM that allows you to have multiple runtime, either of just Node for NVM, for some other runtime, even being Java or something like that, and that allows you to easily switch between the Node version you're currently using. Because even if you think that once you've migrated, you will never go back, trust me, at some point you will need to go back and install, uninstall, and so on. That's really not fun. And that's just a lot of loss of time. And as a consultant, because I switch from project to project, that's a really useful tool because all my projects are not using the same Node version. So now that you have the right Node version, you probably want to migrate. And if you keep going down the update Angular IO, you will see that the first step if I recommend is doing the ng update. If you run it, you will probably get something similar to this, giving you the current version of your Angular application and the one you should go there. Here it's only 17, but you can do it for all the version. And then you will have to run a command to update every package there. In old version, you could say all, but basically nobody was using it, so they removed it. And you should say, OK, I'm updating. That's nice. And Angular does the job. And you probably wonder then, and I skip a slide apparently, but oh yeah. Just a word, because ng update is not just some magic trick. ng update is a schematics. And if you're familiar with Angular, you know a couple of those schematics. Most known is probably the ng generate that you use to generate your component, service, guards, and so on. The ng new to create a new project. But there is also ng add and ng update. The ng add, maybe you used it when you add material, Angular material to a project. But the ng update is the one responsible to do the update. And if you go digging into the documentation of Angular, we clearly explicitate how it's supposed to work. When you run ng update, it will go to every of your dependency, look at the package JSON of this dependency, and look for a specific key called ng update. And if it's present, it will run the goal or the key, the command there to update. If there is nothing, it will do nothing. But looks easy enough, and you could say, okay, that's it, I'm done. And you're still wondering why this guy has 45 minutes to talk when is that just it? The real issue is, like in any project, you have dependency. And you probably might think that your dependency looks like this beautiful library. Everything is at the right place. There's nothing that you don't need. And that's maybe true the 4th, 5th week of your project. But at some point, there is a dependency that's coming that you don't really need because just two different developers having their favorite dependency or favorite library, and they both want to use it. And after a while, your project looks more like this. That's maybe a bit extreme, but you will find some dependency that you don't need anymore, some dependency that were useful 2 versions ago, and all those dependencies are there, and you will have to migrate them if you leave them there. So maybe the first thing to do when you want to migrate is just run the npm ls --all, and it will give you basically your full dependency tree. Basically, what you used to with even to get your full dependency tree, you can get it with npm. You can even go further and look for a specific dependency. Here I look for TypeScript, and it will give you the list of where this dependency is used. That can be quite useful when you try to migrate. But as I said, I have all those dependencies, and I'm not sure why I want all of them. And instead of trying to migrate something you don't need, let's remove it before. Because in my experience, I had to migrate, and I didn't know that much the project. So I thought, okay, all the dependencies there, they are there for a good reason. And I migrate 1, 2 version, and then get stuck because of one dependency. I'm like, how can I fix that? And then I'll look a bit and realize that dependency is there. I don't know why, but it's never used anywhere in the project. So the easiest way to do was just remove it. Because why try to migrate something that you don't need? It's basically like you want to move house and you try to bring everything you have in your current house. No, you don't need all that. You just need what you really need and not all the stuff you keep there. You probably don't take the garbage from one house to another, for instance. So now you want to know, okay, how far I need to move. And to do that, there is npm updated. npm updated is there to give you just a quick snapshot of where are my current dependency, what my semverse allows me to get, and then what's the latest. The one thing not to do is to look at the latest and say, I'm going to install everything there. That's the best way to break your project, basically. But at least it gives you a view of how far do I need to go? Is there something that I'm missing there? Is there an easy update? Because maybe just update what your semver allows. It's already a step in the right direction. And basically then you will feel like a cat. Why? Because you will do the ng update, and then you will try to do the npm install, and fail probably, because that dependency requires that version of Angular. You say, no problem, I will fix that for you. And then you rerun npm I, and Another dependency says, oh, I'm not okay with that version of Angular. And basically, a bit like a cat with a ball of wool, you will grab it and it will go a bit further and so on and so forth until you just have a string and not a full ball of wool. So basically, you're playing like a cat. One thing you will realize after a migration is you can have in your package.JSON something like this. A lot of changes. And that's just what's fit in the screen. If you look on the right, you will see that there is a lot more, and that wasn't even the worst case I got. So basically, you will do a lot of change in your package.JSON. One good thing to know, when you update some dependency, one thing I tend to do to avoid any issue is before doing an npmi, after one failed, I remove my node modules, so I don't have any left over from a previous version. I remove my Angular cache, and I remove my package lock. The package lock is there to fix the versions. I'm trying to upgrade, so I don't want anybody to tell me, no, you cannot go that version. I know, so please don't bother with that. And then do the npmi. And basically, when I say playing like a cat, you will do this loop, change your package.JSON, clean everything, npmi. It works, it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, update the new next dependency and go on and go on. But of course, when you migrate, your dependency might change and some API might change. And luckily, in my case, I got a nice dependency that was kind enough to leave me with a compatibility version of those APIs. It means I could still get the same API as previously. I just needed to change a few packages, but that was it. But all the dependencies are not that nice. And from time to time, you need to go there and change some things because they break. And that's probably what you need to be the most careful about, is how you do migrate those APIs. And then I got a nice problem. I got NGX translate, and I was at Angular. I just migrate to Angular 13, but of course, because I'm migrating, I'm like 13.2, and NGX translates only support 13.0. And there is a version for 14.0, but there is nothing for 13.2. So when I do my npmi, say, no, doesn't match. You need to have Angular 13.0, not Angular 13.2. I was like, okay, but how do I do that? Because I don't want to roll back to an old version of Angular. I want to use this one. And then I followed the rise knowledge of a little green guy. This guy. I used the -- force. Basically, I did an npmi with the -- force. And that's the moment when I say, don't do that, please. Except if you're in exactly my shoes. I know quite well NGX translate. I know it's well supported and there is nothing breaking between Angular 13 and 14. So, and I knew that that was the only dependency that was blocking my migration. So I say, let's try it. It will probably work, but if it does not, I'm kind of in a tough spot, but it worked for me. But what you need to know about this, if you do that every time you migrate, NPM will say, I don't care about the same verse, I'm going in, and I don't care. And if you have 10 or 30 dependency, that's basically the best recipe if you want to get stuck and don't understand anything. But in some specific case, that's really useful. And then I've reached the problems where for a couple of hours, sometimes a day, I felt just like this boat, stuck on the beach, not finding any way to go back and continue my migration. And most of the time, it was again my dependency. And more exactly, I couldn't find them. There was 2 different cases, and of course, 2 different solutions. In the first case, I was using a library that was providing a nice planning component, and from one version to the other, it went missing. I was like, that's strange. Went to the documentation, and they say, yeah, we decided to not support it anymore. It was just a wrapper around this library, so you can use this library. I thought, easy enough. I'm going to change the dependency, see if it's run. So basically, I did that. npmi, everything's work. ngserve looks great. Say, I play a bit with it, but nothing seems broken, so I felt happy. But there was no automated test. And of course, what I miss was that one page where it was used differently. And I didn't check it. And basically get back to, please write tests from time to time. I know some people think testing is doubting, but also at the same time, this is a safety net when you do migration. Because you can run your test, and if everything is green, doesn't mean there is no problem, but at least you feel a bit reassured that everything is working. Except if you just let ChatGPT write all your tests. That's something different. But that wasn't the worst case, because in a couple of hours, we could just fix everything. It was just basically an API migration. Okay, now I need to use it that way. And it was quite easily fixed. The next one was more complicated. Basically, I look everywhere for the new version. I couldn't find it. Ended up on GitHub and got that really nice message saying, you're in shit, guy, because there is no version further than Angular 10. You're like, okay, I have an option. I can try to migrate this nice library and let everybody do that. And everybody enjoy this new version. But it means I need to migrate to Angular 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. You get the thing. I will have had to release basically 8 versions of this dependency. And I wasn't even sure there was no other dependency that would fit in this same case. So I decided not to do that. I wanted to be sure that this dependency could work with Angular 11 at first. So I did the good old trick. I just copy-paste. I copy-paste the whole repository, put it in my project, change a few imports, and it worked. I had to change just like 10, 20 lines of code, but that's nothing. And the funniest part of it is it's still working in Angular 18, so there was nothing in there blocking me to really use the next version of Angular. And when I look a bit deeper in this library, basically all is in there exists in out of the library. So the plan at some point is to say, okay, I'm not going to use this library anymore. I'm going to use the one that's well maintained, because this code is not maintained, and if there is an issue there, nobody knows about it. So you need to be careful. But that was a quick solution for my problem. And that's when I landed on something worse. I was migrating to Angular 15, and everything works fine. The NGFDs goes well. I just do a couple of npmi, everything looks good. I try to do the ngserve, and then I got an error. And the error is talking about post-CSS. I'm like, okay, let's check in my dependency. I open my package JSON, no post-CSS there. I'm like, that's strange. Why is it bothering with that? So basically, I went to my good old npmls and type npmls post-CSS. And indeed, it was used some places in my code. But it looks right. Right? Does anybody see something wrong? Yeah. Come to me afterward. You got a nice little sheep just for you. That was it. Those dependencies were mismatching. I was version 8 and version 7, just down there. But I didn't realize because there's a bunch of line and at first read it looks great. So I didn't realize that. I was like, that's this. How do I fix that? Or first, is there anywhere else that I have that issue? Because no, I'm worried. After looking a bit, I discovered a new command in npm. It's called find dupes. Basically, the goal is to find duplicate dependency that can have different versions for there. Apparently, it's a common problem. When you write a tool to do that, that's something common. You don't do that if you don't have the issue frequently. So when I run it, it was quite obvious, to say the least, that there was a real issue there. I'm a Java developer at first. I just end up in Angular because I'm a consultant, and sometimes clients say, I want you to do that, and you learn. That's basically how it works. So I was like, okay, if I'm in Java, I'm going to look if I can update my dependency. No, I cannot because I have a whole lot of other dependency crossing, so I won't do that. The next step is say, okay, can I exclude that because I don't need it? One version is enough. And then that's when I realized that when you use npm, you cannot exclude dependency. You just need to deal with it. I'm like, okay, but here I'm really stuck. And then looking down, searching for solution, I found another npm tool called npm dedupe. And I will explain you how it works, because that's quite easy, but at the same time, that's not the obvious way to solve that. So if you have a dependency tree, something like that, so I have dependency A that depends on B and C, and both depend on D, but of course not with the same version. When you run an npm dedupe, what it does is try to move this dependency upper in the tree and fix the version at this level. That way, nobody tries to use another version. But you have no control on what it's doing. You just do the npm dedupe and it does that for you. Just if you look at what's happening when you run an npm dedupe, you only see the package lock changing. Because it doesn't change anything in your dependency, just say in the lock, I'm forcing you to use those dependency and load those first. So that's basically what I did. I ran the npm dedupe. It fixed my problem, nice. And then, migrating to the next version, I didn't see any other problem. I used it once, and that's all. I never seen it again. So I decided, okay, for further reference, I will check from time to time if I don't have those kind of dependency, because that's worrying. To go further, you can run npmi and provide the dedupe flag to say, I want you to run in that mode. I personally don't do that because I prefer to know that when there is something wrong in my dependency. Because otherwise you run that and you might have some strange behavior without knowing why. So I prefer to know, at least. And then comes styling, because we all use styles for web apps. And because your components evolve and change, your styling may break. I was lucky enough that I think I had to do 2 fixes in CSS, so I was lucky. But there is people less lucky than I am. The person using Angular materials. Because Angular material recently, or kind of, changed a lot of things. And if you have deep embedded styles, that's hard, because they try to help you, let's be honest. They provide you with schematic to say you can migrate. That's nice. It does a part of the job for you, but it cannot do everything, and you might have styling breaking in your app. I have a colleague that had to basically redo all the style of the application because the styling was so deep for the current app that it could not be migrated. And if you think of it, that's not only a problem for Angular. That's basically a problem for any application that use styling, because if you look at how we style application, there's always like 5 ways to do it. So they cannot figure out how did you do that when there's only 5, so let's be honest. So we try to do the best, but at some point it might break. Then comes the linter. The linter is really a nice tool. It helps you notice some bad usage in code, some missing things, or some really bad things. But from Angular, I think 9 to 10, they moved from the good old TS-lint to the ES-lint. And basically, I needed to do the migration. And again, if you look at the documentation, there is everything for you. There is the schematic to add the ES-lint, and even the migration tool to convert your TS-lint to ES-lint. But the TS-lint in my project was probably not used anymore for a couple of time now, a couple of years, I would say. And basically, you couldn't run and couldn't migrate automatically. So basically, what I did is take a proper TS-lint, correctly formatted, and rerun it to the ES-lint to have something properly and running correctly for an Angular app. And I was done. I was at Angular at the time 17, but now 18, and the migration was done. And you will maybe like, good, my job is done. But of course not. If you migrate and upgrade your code, you will probably have some new code, nice, shiny and everything, but there is still things there that needs to be cared of, because you cannot say, okay, everything is migrated, I don't care. And one thing to help you notice what's going wrong is this kind of linting rules or extensions. When you add this linting extension and you run it, it will show you clearly, okay, this piece of code is deprecated. Please take care of that. If you just install the linter extension, you will get error in your linter. I choose to put it in warning until I fix every warning, because I cannot block a project now because we've migrated and there is a lot of deprecated code. But once it's done, you should put it in error. Nobody should use those deprecated API. That's what we do in Java. We should do probably the same with TypeScript. And then we're left with some to-dos, because there's still things to do. There's still some improvement that can be done, and we could take advantage of the latest of Angular. Among them, there was standalone components, because the modules are not required anymore with Angular, and with Angular 19, they're gonna be by default standalone. Components will be by default standalone, so we should go there. There was also all the input binding that you can do. When you have a resolver, you can automatically bind it to an input. That's probably something we could do because that's less code. And what I like to say is less code means less bug, and the code I don't write is bug-free. One of the things was the new control flow syntax. That's now standardized, and that is really, really nice. And moreover, give you better performances out of the box. And with all that, also signals, because signals are the future of Angular, and we will see a lot more signals in the future. The good thing is there is schematics for part of those things. And one thing was already strike right now is the control flow. It's done. We just run the schematic, and we were done. So those schematics can be really, really powerful. It can help you use the latest of Angular without changing that much code. If I must be honest, when I run the schematics for the new control flow syntax, I look at all the changes by hand, because it's a tool. It tries to do its best, but at some point you will realize, okay, that can be better. A good example with the new control syntax, you have the @4, and there is an @empty. In the case, there is no value. And it's not properly converting this behavior if you were using something with the for and if else, something like that. It cannot figure it out by itself. So that's things you need to do by yourself. But it took me half a day to migrate to new control flow. And the CFP app is not a small app. And I did the same on another app. Wasn't small either. And again, half a day. And I used the new control flow syntax with better performances and everything. So that's really nice. But there is sometimes that those schematics are not enough. The best case is the standalone components. I could not only run the standalone component schematic migration tool to migrate everything to standalones. The project is too complex with too much specific things that you don't see frequently in Angular for it to work out of the box. So another approach, if the schematics are not enough for you, is just do it step by step. Every time you open a component where you need to do a change, switch it to standalone and see, okay, if it's working, because it's just one flag to add. That's not that complicated. And it's probably good enough for you to run it. You will need to re-import a few things, but that's still it. So that's probably another approach. If you have not the time or not the will to run those schematics, or if they failed, do it by hand. Every time you change something, take a look. Oh, I can do that change, I do it. Basically, you're improving your code while editing it. So that's a win-win situation. But I think you realize at this point that it wasn't the easiest journey. And more time than I would like to admit, I felt just like this car, stuck in the mud, without knowing exactly how I can find a solution. And I asked my colleagues, they are knowledgeable, but they couldn't figure out that error. For instance, the post CSS, everyone was like, what the hell? Never seen that. And you go on Google, on Stack Overflow, cannot find solution. And sometimes you can use the new tool, the new shiny tool that everybody is talking about, AI, but not to give you the right answer. Because let's be honest, it never gave me the right answer to my problem. But what it did is give me new ideas, new thing to try. Basically, help me de-zoom from the situation, find other way to attack the problem, and to help me reach the point where I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't see that. The best example is this post CSS thing where it's like, did you try to run npm dedupe? I was like, what is npm dedupe? And it wasn't for the good reason he asked me to do that, but basically it can help you because basically you have a pair programmer that's never tired, that's don't bother if you ask him the stupidest question ever, and sometimes you need to pay, but let's be honest, it's way less cheaper than my colleagues. And basically, that's a really nice tool to have with you. That's not a solution, but that's a really damn nice tool. But again, I don't want to do that every day, not even every week. So is there any tool that can help me migrate more safely, step by step? And there is. There is two I would like to name here. There is Renovate and Dependabot. Dependabot is only available on GitHub, but Renovate you can run on your in-house CI. And what we will do is we'll scan your dependency, and not only for JavaScript or TypeScript, you can do it for Java also. And it will scan it and say, okay, there is a difference there. You can do an upgrade there. And if you configure it properly, it can even create pull requests for you. And you can have all your pull requests there saying, oh, there is those updates I need to do. And even give you, okay, the link to the next version so you can see the changelog. And if you have good CI/CD with test, linting, everything, you could probably say when it's a patch version, just auto-merge it. So automatically, I'm up to the latest version. One thing you need to be careful about, it's great for all your dependency, but it's not working properly for Angular itself. So if you want to upgrade Angular, you still need to go through the ng update thing. Because Dependabot will try to update one version. There is a way to say, if you need to upgrade this dependency, you need to also to upgrade all these. But that's way more complicated than what Dependabot is capable of when you use the ng update. So that's maybe the only dependency that you need to be careful is Angular, where you still need to use the ng update. But the ng update is probably the easiest part of the migration. All these come to the end of the journey. But through this journey, I've seen a lot of things. But I would like for you to remember 3 things, only 3. The first thing is when you want to do migration, do it one major version at a time, not more. It's not efficient to do one more. You will just end up in more problems. You can do that one version, see everything is working, great. I can even release that version and keep going. But that way you have every time something that you can deliver, something that you know that's stable, and you're not trying to reach for the star without even knowing how to build a rocket. You go step by step. The next thing is having automated tests. It will not fix every problem for you. It will not raise every issue for you. But as I said, it's a safety net. It's there for a good reason. It helps you know that after everything you did, every test you did, you're still aware that it's working. There's someone else checking for you. And let's be honest, a computer is way more good at doing the same thing over and over again. As humans, we are not good at that. Ask somebody to do the same thing twice, I'm guaranteeing that at some point it will change, because it will think of something else, of saying, oh, I could do that better doing that. Computer doesn't think about that. It will do it exactly the same way every time. That's guaranteeing that it's working properly. The last thing is you should plan your update. The worst thing you can do is say, okay, I need to upgrade Angular. Oh, we don't have the time. We'll do a couple of weeks, and weeks become month, month become year, and you're like 8 versions behind at some point. And most of people will say, oh, I'm at the 8th version too late. I won't bother with that. If you do it frequently, it's easier to do because you know all the issue you might end up with. So you will fix it quite easily. And it's not that much time. Just to give you an idea, the migration from 10 to 17 took me like between 15 and 20 days. And that's 7 versions. So we're like 2 days per version, including that I didn't know the full project. I just end up there and trying to do it. So if you know your project, you know what's in there, what you use, what you do not use, you can go be way more quick than that. And the latest migration I've did were like 2 hours, it's done. Great. That's not that much time. And if it's only 2 hours, you can say, call the business and say, we're going to upgrade Angular. Because the question usually is like, why? It's working. And if you have to sell a migration for 10 days, it will be, no, we can do something else. But when it's even not half a day, they're like, okay, I don't care. Because if you say it's better for the app, they will go for it if it's only 2 hours. I'm going to wrap up here the session. I will just ask you for you to give me feedback. In the app, there's just a little button for you to tap. In any case, that's a great way for me to improve, to learn. And if you have a question or something, you can come here. I have stickers for those who want. I know there's someone that needs a sheep there. And there is a link to the slides and also my social networks if you want to chat. Thank you for your attention. Do you have any questions? Yeah? Yeah.
I take it that at this point you're already using RxJS and even perhaps NGRX. Why go to the trouble of migrating to signals when you have something that works?
Okay. If I correctly understand your question, it's saying you're already using RxJS. Why would you migrate using signals? I will give you the short answer, but if you want the long answer, I would say come back Wednesday when I have the talk about the latest from Angular. But if something you need to know is RxJS and signals are two different things. RxJS is there for asynchronous calls, where signals are synchronous, but they're for state management. So when you use signals, you can render just a part of your page, not just even just a component. You can go smaller than that. RxJS is totally different. It's more useful to call backend. So that's the reason we try to do that. And just a sneak peek, in Angular 19, there will be schematics to migrate part of the inputs and all that to signals. So it's probably the way forward for components, not for service that needs to do asynchronous calls. Any other questions? No? Yeah?
Can we safely say that like it's easier to upgrade Angular the further we go, or is it like always this?
I would say that, but the question was, is it easier to migrate further along the line than at the beginning? I would say yes. When you migrate from 17 to 18, it was quite easy. But again, you need to be taking account two things. One, I was more used to the project, so I have better knowledge, so it's easier. And another thing is there is a lot less legacy when you're between 17 and 18 than when you're between 10 and 11. The libraries are more fresh, more up to date, so it's an easier environment also. So yes, it's easier, but probably there is some ecosystem causes in there more than just it's easier for the newest version. Any more questions? No? Thank you again, and if you want stickers, they are there.
All systems are nominal. Initialize Genesis sequence.